Well, we are once again going to have 12 games that's going to be happening in the midweek action of MLS. And while we only have one game tomorrow between TFC and Montreal in the Canadian Classique, we have a hockey-style 11 games that is going to be taking place on Wednesday night. And those 11 games is going to be taking place in the windows between 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, all the way until the final game finish right around 12:30 a.m. Eastern and 9:30 p.m. my time, and that there's going to be a situation where there could be 7 games that is going to be kicking off, well, not really kicking off, but pretty much simultaneously play at the same time, and I basically going to have to deal with the same nightmare that I have every year in decision day when there's every single game kicking off at around the same time. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try my best in terms of keeping an eye on that game, and there's no guarantee I'm going to watch every single of these games, and that for the review for this week, I'm going to do the same thing I did during the weekend action, which is these first 6 games you see on the board will be part 1 of the review, and when I switch the board to look at the last 6 games of this midweek action, that's going to be part number 2, and I'll do that on Thursday morning, because there is no way in the world I am going to review 12 games after the final game that's going to be finished on Wednesday, especially the fact that I'm going to have to watch some highlights in terms of some of these games, and especially these East Coast games that kicks off around 7:30 and 8 o'clock and 7 o'clock game, where I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get to every single of these games and able to watch it at the same time. But that being said, let us actually begin by talking about the only game that's going to be happening on Tuesday. And as I said, it is the Canadian Classique between Toronto FC and Montreal Impact. Toronto still the only team that have not lost a game in the league with a record of 5-3-0, while Montreal currently have a record of 3-1-3, and this game is kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Last time both of these teams met was back on Friday, when Toronto were able to beat Montreal in a very uneventful, probably forgettable Canadian Classique, which was a 1-0 away win for them. And that, I'm hoping this game is going to be much more exciting than what I saw on Friday, where that was anything but a Canadian Classique that I know of. And that TFC also are looking to do some historical thing in this game too, because if they are able to get a win or a draw in this game, I think they tie the record for the longest unbeaten run in the regular season in MLS history, and they have a chance to potentially break that if they are able to win another one or draw another game after this one. Now, in terms of the head-to-head battle, it was a 1-0 win for TFC on the Friday meeting. Then it was a 4-3 crazy game between both of these teams in the MLS's back tournament before TFC wins 2-1 against Montreal. Then it was a 2-0 win for TFC away before Montreal did win 2-0 against TFC. I'm not quite sure why I wrote Montreal twice over here. And by the way, these head-to-head matchup does not include the Canadian Championship, which I know they didn't meet each other in the Canadian Championship last year, and that Montreal did win 1-0 against TFC in the first leg, and then in the second leg, TFC was able to win 1-0, but obviously they went to a penalty kick shootout, and Montreal was able to win the penalty kick shootout. That being said, for my prediction, I'm going to go with Toronto in this one, because, you know, if you look at the first phase, and out of these 3 Canadian teams that is playing against each other, it's pretty clear that Toronto is the top Canadian team out of that, and that, you know, unless if Thierry Henry can really get his team going, where his team pretty much did not show up back on Friday, although there was good reason why they decided not to kind of show up, because, as I said before, there was a rumor that they weren't supposed to play that game, and they asked Toronto to not play that game because of the circumstances that was going on around the league. But Toronto, of course, says no, and that they kind of feel like dejected and kind of feel like they might as well just kind of protest in the game by not even showing up in this one. While in this game, I think that excuse cannot be the case if they don't show up in this one, and that they definitely want to look for some revenge against a Toronto team that, you know, they're kind of a little bit better in terms of the injury chart. You know, there's a question whether or not if Ayola Quinola or Josie Altidore is going to be available in this game. I believe Richie Larea might be available back in this game, but we shall see whether or not if that is the case, because he had a bit of a sore knee that kept him out in the last game of the Canadian Classic, and we'll see if that sore knee has recovered to be ready to play in this one Canadian Classic. That's going to be the only game that's taking place on Tuesday. But that being said, moving on into the next game, and the first game of a very busy night of Wednesday MLS action is Atlanta versus Inter Miami. So this is a match that was ultimately the match that kind of had a ripple effect in terms of the rest of the game back on last Wednesday to be postponed because of what happened. But they are going to be finally playing against each other for the first time this Wednesday, and let's hope that, of course, is the case, as Atlanta is coming into this game with a record of 3-0-4, while Miami currently have a 1-0-6 record. This game kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Atlanta, unfortunately, lost their first ever game in the so-called Southern rivalry, or the Southern Derby, between Orlando City 3-1 at home, while Miami, of course, lost 1-0 to Nashville away, and that loss definitely really hurts for Miami, because that was definitely a winnable game against a Nashville team that definitely did not look like they were at its best for the first couple of games of their MLS existence. Now, as I said, this is the first ever meeting between both of these teams, and for the prediction of this game, oh boy, this is kind of a little bit of a tough one, but I'm going to say Atlanta's going to win this one, mainly because I think they need this win more than what Miami did, and that they want to prove that that last game against Orlando City was just one of those games that unfortunately they met an Orlando City team unlike any of the Orlando City team that they faced in the past in this rivalry, and they just got absolutely walled up. So they're looking to try to bounce back against a Miami team that, yeah, clearly this has not been a great start for David Beckham's team, and that for the first 7 games of their existence, the big issue of this team has to be goal scoring. Like, I thought they might have turned a corner against Orlando City by scoring 3 goals in that game. Yeah, that doesn't seem like it was the case against Nashville. And even though I know they tried their best for the last 15 minutes to try to finally get the goal to maybe at least get a point out of Nashville, they did not do that whatsoever. And that unless if this is going to be a game where Miami can basically look like they were against Orlando City and able to put up a good performance against an Atlanta team that is beatable, but if they can only put on that same performance they play against Orlando City, I just don't see how Miami potentially is going to win this one, and that I'm going to go with Atlanta with this one as the win, although I will expect this to be relatively a low-scoring game because both of these teams do not have a lot of success in terms of scoring goals during this season. But moving on, in terms of the next match, and speaking of team that is having trouble in terms of scoring goals, and a game that could be another low-scoring game, is FC Cincinnati versus the Chicago Fire, who FC Cincinnati currently have a record of 2-4, while Chicago has a record of 2-5. This game is one of the free games on Wednesday that's going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. And like I said, I expect this one to be a low-scoring game too, because the last couple of FC Cincinnati home game has been 0-0 draw, and that I won't be surprised if this is going to be another 0-0 draw again, knowing the fact that it seemed like their defense looked very good whenever they are playing at home, but going forward on the attack, that's when things are a little bit of a problem. Now, as I said, FC Cincinnati in the last home game, they drew 0-0 to Columbus, while Chicago lost 3-1 to NYCFC away. The head-to-head meeting, this was also a rematch of the Tuesday match from last week, where Chicago was able to win 3-0 against FC Cincinnati, and that was actually the first game that they are playing at Soldier Field in 15 years, and able to had a dream homecoming kind of game by winning 3-0 against FC Cincinnati. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams the last time both of these teams met at Nippert Stadium, while Chicago, of course, winning 2-1 against FC Cincinnati. Or actually, it was FC Cincinnati that won 2-1 against Chicago. I don't know why I said 2 Chicago won 2-1 in that one. It was actually FC Cincinnati that won that game, and I think that was the game where it ended their long winless run that they had in their miserable first season in MLS. But either way, I expect this to be a draw, and that, for Chicago, again, I don't know what are they going to look like in this game. Are they going to be looking like the team that looked very good in that last game against FC Cincinnati and just their attack just completely ripped them apart? Or are they going to look like the team in the last game against NYCFC, which, while their attack, there were moments of potentially getting a couple of goals in that game. They weren't being very clinical, and on the defensive end, it was an absolutely mess. So, yeah, this will be a very interesting kind of game, and I'm pretty sure FC Cincinnati will not forget about that 3-0 thrashing that they took back on last week, and that they're looking to hope to try to play a little bit better in this one. But I'm just going to say this is going to be a draw between both of these teams, and I won't be surprised if this is going to be the third game in a row that FC Cincinnati is going to draw 0-0 against their opposition. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the other Ohio team, that is Columbus versus the Union, and this is probably one of the more exciting game of this midweek action. Well, when I say exciting game, I don't really mean that you probably are going to expect a lot of goals and just some wild kind of peak MLS action you're going to see between both of these teams. But I think this is going to be a chess match between both of these teams, and that there could definitely be a kind of game where it's between these two very good teams in the Eastern Conference, and both of these teams are looking to try to grind out a result or even get 3 points over the other Eastern Conference team that is doing very well so far this season. Now, Columbus, of course, they have a record of 5-2-1, while Philly currently have a record of 4-3-1, as both of these teams are coming into this game with only 1 losses. 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific is the kickoff of this game. Columbus drew 0-0 against FC Cincinnati away, while Philly absolutely destroyed DC United at home by winning 4-1 in that game. And in the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was a 2-0 win for Columbus over Philly. Then it was a 3-0 win for Philly over Columbus at home. Actually, I only put the last 4 head-to-head match in this head-to-head stats line, but it was then a 0-0 draw between both of these teams at MetLife Stadium before it was a 1-0 win for Columbus over Philly. And I'm actually going to go with Columbus with this one, and I know this one is kind of hard to call because, again, this is a game between two very good teams right now in the Eastern Conference, but I'm going to give Columbus the edge in this one, mainly because I think they're eventually going to have to shake off this little blip that they are going through where, they drew 0-0 against a Cincinnati team that you think they should be able to break them down, and especially how they just absolutely destroyed FC Cincinnati in the MLS's back tournament. I was kind of surprised the fact that they weren't able to find a breakthrough against a very stealth the kind of defense that FC Cincinnati put against them. Whereas in this game, I think this one could also favor them a little bit, because I think Columbus, once again, they're just going to try to sit back against the Union and try to hit them on the break, which is something that I think in these last 2 games they kind of struggled to do that, because other teams are starting to figure out that they are trying to kind of use the same tactics that the Portland Timbers usually do, which is tends to just sit back and trying to hit teams on the counterattack. Actually, I'm not surprised why they decided to choose they would choose almost the same tactics as the Timbers would do, because Caleb Porter, former Portland Timbers head coach, assuming maybe he kind of brought that idea with him here. Well, actually, the Timbers didn't really look like this when Caleb Porter was in charge of that team, but it has worked out very fine for this Columbus team, except times when they actually are given the ball, and when I see games where in these last 2 games you can clearly see what the opponent is trying to do. Not only try to give them the ball and not allow them to go on the counterattack and look the more lethal, but also teams are trying to of course stop the game and stop the rhythm of this game, and kind of have a stop and go kind of rhythm that just disrupt what Columbus, of course, is trying to do. But eventually, I think they're going to figure it out, and that I expect the Union to probably have a lot of the ball in this game, and that Columbus is just going to play right into what they really like when they're able to beat teams during this season. Plus, the Union, yes, they won 4-1 against DC United away, but I'm going to say that big win was kind of a little bit more because of DC United being just an awful team right now, more than the fact that the Union looked like they were really looking like the team that is going to be compete for the top spot in the Eastern Conference. Now, that being said, I'm not going to take anything credit for what the Union did to DC in this game, but this is a good test to see whether or not if this could be a team that could take over the top spot in the Eastern Conference when they meet another team that is looking to try to get that spot bought back after TFC, of course, stole it away from them after this little mini bleep that they are in. But either way, this should be a very good game, and that this is going to be one of those 7:30 p.m., 4:30 p.m. Pacific time kickoff that I'm going to keep a very close eye on in this one. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Atlantic Cup between the Redbulls and DC United, and I would also want to call this the Desperation Cup because both of these teams desperately need a win in this game. Now, the Redbulls currently coming into this game with a 3-2-3 record, while DC United currently coming into this game with a 1-3-4 record, and that they are actually on a 6-game winless run while they are at it. And this game is going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, the same time that the Columbus versus Philly game and the FC Cincinnati versus Chicago game is going to kick off. Now, the Redbulls, of course, drew 1-1 to the Revs in the last game, although, as I mentioned in that game in the review, I thought it was a game that was up for grabs for either the Redbulls to win it or the Redbulls potentially losing the game late, but thankfully they were able to hold on to a fair 1-1 draw and get a good point against New England on the road. While DC United, we just mentioned they just got absolutely plummeted by Philly on the road by losing 4-1 in that game. Head-to-head matches in the last 5 of the Atlantic Cup, it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams the last time both them meet. Then it was a 2-1 win for the Redbulls over DC United. It was a 3-3 draw between both of these teams before it was a 1-0 win against the Redbulls over DC United, and it was a 1-0 win for the Redbulls on the road against DC United. And it's pretty clear that the Atlantic Cup, at least for the last 5 meetings, has clearly gone in the favor of the Redbulls. And because of that, I'm going to go with the Redbulls in this game. And that it's not also just because of past history of how the Redbulls have seemed to take a little bit of a dominance in this Atlantic Cup, but right now there's really not much that I can say that about DC United potentially getting a chance to get a win against any opponent right now. I mean, they have just looked like one of the worst, if not the worst team right now in the Eastern Conference for the past couple of games, and that, the Redbulls, while they haven't been at their best this season, and while Chris Armour still hasn't really figured out the biggest question this team has, which is goal scoring and who is actually going to be the number 9 in this team, I definitely have more confidence in terms of them really needed to get a win in this game compared to Ben Olsen DC United team that just seemed like they're just in a complete loss with the direction that they're heading in, which therefore that's why I'm going to say the Redbulls are going to win this game at home, and that they get a huge win that they desperately needed after some rough kind of patches that they've been going for the past 2 games of this season. But moving on, in terms of the last game on this board, and the last game that I'm going to basically put as my review for part number 1 of the midweek action, is going to be the Houston Dynamo versus Minnesota, which this game is going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Now, despite the fact that Houston have only got 1 win this season, they have had a lot of draws in this season, and they're kind of like the draw kings of MLS with 4 draw and 2 losses. While Minnesota, their record is at 3-2-2, but they have now lost 2 in a row ever since they start the season with a 5-game unbeaten streak, and are definitely not looking good heading into this game against the Dynamo, which will, as I said, kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Houston, of course, won 5-2 against SKC away, and a lot of that has to be thanks to a couple of former Minnesota players in the likes of Darwin Quintero and Christian Ramirez completely lightening up that SKC defense and scoring goals to be part of that 5-2 demolition that they hand SKC on the road. While Minnesota, yeah, they lost 3-1 against FC Dallas, and they made FC Dallas look like a team that never had any issue in terms of goal scoring. That was a big issue with this team for the first couple of games coming back after the regular season was suspended. Now, in terms of the head-to-head meeting, Houston, they have a very good record against Minnesota at home by winning 2-0 against them in the last match. Now, this also does not include the U.S. Open Cup, where Minnesota did beat them 3-2 on the road, and that was the only time that Minnesota was able to win against the Dynamo at BBVA Compass Stadium. But other than that, it was a 1-0 win for Minnesota at home against Houston, before it was a 3-0 win against Minnesota at home for Houston, and then it was a 2-1 win for Minnesota against Houston at home, before Houston returned the favorite and win 2-1 against Minnesota. And that the home team in this fixture seems to be the king in terms of these two teams meeting each other, which is why I'm gonna say that Houston is going to win this game. And as much as I really want the Loons to kind of stop this bleeding that they've been going through in the last 2 games, yeah, it doesn't help that you have to face against a team that you struggle to get victory over them whenever you play on the road. And it also doesn't help when you're playing a Houston team that must have a lot of confidence coming into this game. And especially those guys that I mentioned, former Minnesota player Christian Ramirez and Darwin Quintero lighting up that SKC defense in the last game. Yeah, they're capable of doing the same thing in this one, and they definitely they want to do that even more against their former employees in this one too. So yeah, I feel like this could be a rough one for Minnesota, but I'm just finger crossing that hopefully my prediction might be wrong in this, and that the Loons actually will show up in this game and just not take an absolute beating like they have kind of done against Houston whenever they play them on the road. But that being said, I am now going to switch the boards and look at the last 6 games that's going to be happening during the midweek action of this week's MLS action. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, is the New England Revolution against NYCFC. So you know how earlier I said that the Houston Dynamo is the draw king of MLS? Well, New England pretty much need to have a word with me, because technically they are the real draw kings of MLS, with the league leading 5 draws this season, winning 2 games while losing 1. While NYCFC, they have not drawn at all this season, as they have won 3 games and lost 5 so far in their first 8 games of the season. This game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. New England, of course, drew 1-1 against the Redbulls at home, while NYCFC were able to win 3-1 against Chicago, and have definitely looked like more of the NYCFC team that we know last season. And really, this is one of the first time we're started to see this NYCFC team started to be what many people hope that Ronnie Delia can convert this NYCFC team to be. But in the last 5 head-to-head matches, it was a 2-0 win for the Revolution. Then it was a 2-1 win for NYCFC over the Revs, before it was a 1-0 win for the Revs over NYCFC. Then it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, before it was a 2-1 win for the Revolution over NYCFC. And since the Revs have drawn so many games this season, I might as well just keep up the trend and say this is going to be a draw. I mean, this is a team that I know that they could do good things this season under Bruce Arena, but once again, the biggest issue with the Revs this season is that they just tends to don't have that goal scorer that is able to score the crucial goal to get them over the line and get a crucial 3 points at home. But that being said, this season they have also performed well enough that even though when they're not at their best, they also will find a way to score goals to at least get a draw out of this one. So I think this is going to be a draw between both of these team, and that, not only this is going to be the first draw for NYCFC this season, but this might be the now league leading 6 draws that the New England Revolution is going to have to endure after this game. But moving on, in terms of the next game, is SKC. They play against FC Dallas in this game. So Sporting KC currently have a record of 5-1-2, while FC Dallas currently have a record of 2-3-1. But they got their first win last week against Minnesota, which was the first time they actually got a win ever since all the way back in February when they played their first game against the Union and able to win 2-0 at home. This game is going to be kicking off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. SKC, of course, drew 1-1 to Colorado away in the last game, while Dallas won 3-1 against Minnesota at home. Last 5 head-to-head matches, I'm pretty sure SKC fans don't have don't need a reminder of what happened last year, especially on decision day, where FC Dallas absolutely destroyed an SKC team that was already having a bad season, and this pretty much just put the icing on the cake with a 6-0 drumming that they took against FC Dallas. Then it was a 2-0 win for Dallas against SKC on the road, before SKC did win 3-0 against Dallas and won 2-0 against Dallas at home, before it was a 1-0 win for FC Dallas over Sporting KC. But for this game, I'm going to say Sporting KC is going to win this one, and they're going to bounce back after been a bit of a rough patch that Peter Vermeer's Sporting KC team has gone through these last 2 games. I mean, these last 2 games, they have looked kind of something similar to what happened to them last season, but I have a feeling in this game they should be able to get a win against an FC Dallas team that, while in the last game against Minnesota, they kind of figured things out and finally are able to get their first win. We don't know whether or not if that is going to happen. And keep in mind, I will always say that in that game between Minnesota versus Dallas, and not to discredit Dallas in that game, but I feel like Minnesota, the way that they play in this game, they kind of gift-wrapped Dallas the win in that one, and I'm pretty sure SKC would not want to do that against FC Dallas in this one. And that, for Dallas, if they need to prove to me that they're a team that is actually back to their best, and that this Luchi Gonzalez team is going to be like the team from last season, they need to, of course, put in a good performance, because Peter Vermeer's team is not going to be happy with these last 2 results, and he is desperate in terms of trying to get a win in this game to kind of ride the ship a little bit in a team that, even though they're still at the top of the Western Conference right now, they definitely don't look like a team that is one that should belong in the top part of the Western Conference. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the only game that actually kicked off on Wednesday that is going to be a rematch between Nashville SC versus Orlando City. So in that game, it was Orlando City, of course, winning 3-1 against Nashville. And up until that point, that, of course, improved Orlando City record to 3-2-2. But now they have a record of 4-2-2, because in the last game, they did something that they've been desperately waiting to happen for pretty much the last 3 years. And that is finally beating Atlanta United, and doing it in style too, by beating Atlanta United at Mercedes-Benz Stadium by winning 3-1 against them. While Nashville, they also had an impressive victory too. They, of course, also got a 1-0 win against Miami, and themselves also did something historic, as that was the first ever home win for Nashville SC in MLS history. And it's going to be interesting to see coming into this game how both of these teams is going to do after they were able to do a bit of a milestone in their club history with a historic win last week. But I feel like this is a game that Orlando is probably going to win this. And in that game against Nashville, it was kind of men against boys in terms of the way that Orlando just completely cut open Nashville apart, and that if it wasn't for Joe Willis with a couple of big save, and that Orlando City at least show a little bit of mercy toward Nashville, but not really been at their best in terms of finishing, that game would have been 5 or 6-1 in favor of Orlando City, and I don't see how this one is going to be any different. And that despite the fact that Nashville, they look very compact in that game against Miami, yeah, that was Miami. That was a team that they faced that struggle in terms of scoring goals. This is an Orlando team that do not struggle in terms of scoring goal, and this is a team that, if you want to talk about which team is the most fun team to watch, this Orlando City team that is under Oscar Pereira, in my opinion, is probably the most fun team to watch. Like, I just so enjoy watching this team play and the style that they play every single week, and I expect this could be something similar where Orlando City is once again going to run riot over Nashville SC, and that they should be able to get the victory over Nashville in this one. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is RSL versus the Seattle Sounders. Now, this is also a very underrated matchup because both of these teams are coming off with some big resort, and at least in one team, after all the adversity that they had to face this week, well, not only the fact that they were able to get an impressive 4-4 draw against Portland, where they were down 4-2 for the last 5 minutes, and somehow, in some way, were able to come back into this game to get a point, but they also now realize that their owner, Deloy Hansen, is going to sell the team and is not going to be no longer going to be involved with the team, which that alone is a huge victory for RSL, knowing what has gone on with him and all those racist remarks that he's been saying that he definitely deserved to be ousted as an MLS owner. But they are going to be facing against the Seattle Sounders team, which this game is going to be kicking off at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, that just beat LAFC 3-0 at home. Or, actually, they didn't beat them 3-0 at home. They actually beat them 3-1 at home against LAFC. But still, they got the 3 points against LAFC, and they're definitely full of confidence heading into this one. Now, that being said, when you look at the last 5 head-to-head matchup, even though Seattle did win 2-0 against RSL in the last match, it was RSL that won 3-0 against Seattle before Seattle was able to win 1-0 against RSL. Then RSL was able to win 2-0 against Seattle before it was a 1-0 win for RSL over Seattle. And because of that, I'm going to go with the upset, and I'm going to say RSL is going to win this because, for whatever reason, when the Seattle Sounders play against RSL at Rio Tinto Stadium, they always tend to struggle. And not to mention the fact that I think when you look at what RSL has been gone through, and after, as I mentioned about Deloy Hansen pretty much no longer part of their team and are ready to sell the team, that has to be a huge burden off of those RSL players, and that has to be such a big confident boost heading into this game against a Sounder team that, yes, they will definitely have a huge confident boost themselves by winning 3-1 against LAFC. But the question is there going to be a letdown after that emotional win? I mean, we've seen before where when teams are able to get a huge victory, even though you expect that they're going to continue that momentum in the next game, sometimes they could have a big letdown. And that RSL is a team that Seattle cannot take very lightly, and that this is a team that can easily be a team that could resort into a letdown heading into this one. So that's why I'm going to say RSL is going to win this one, and that in some way this is going to be my upset pick in terms of these 12 games that's going to be happening in the midweek action. Speaking of team that is red hot, the LA Galaxy is another team that has been a little bit red hot ever since they got out of the MLS's back tournament, where they looked like they were dead. Like, they looked like they were a team that you would think that is not going to finish well in the Western Conference, and looked like this was a rebuilding year. But then, 2 games later, after beating both California team, their hated rival LAFC, and also their hated rival, the San Jose Earthquakes, all of a sudden, they have momentum, and they look like a dangerous team in the Western Conference with a record of 2-3-2. While the Portland Timbers, as I mentioned, they of course drew 4-4 to RSL at home, but that felt like a loss for Giovanni Savarese team. And, this is going to be a game that I'm pretty sure Savarese would really want his team to bounce back after just such an embarrassing resort of them blowing that lead late in the game and at home, nevertheless. But they are coming into this game with a record of 3-2-2, and this game kicks off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific time. Last 5 head-to-head matchup, the Galaxy, of course, or the Portland Timbers were able to win 2-1 against the Galaxy before the Timbers were able to win 4-0 against the Galaxy. But before that, it was a 2-1 win for the Galaxy over Portland. A 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and it was a 2-1 win against or a 2-1 win that the Galaxy did against the Portland Timbers. And for my prediction of this game, I'm going to say this is going to be a draw between both of these teams. And even though I kind of want to pick the Galaxy to win this because of the form that they are in, they're about to play against a Timbers team that if they weren't angry after the Cascadia Derby resort, they're probably going to be even more angry heading into this one after they let that last game slip and let the 3-point slip with those blow lead that happened in the last 5 minutes of the game. But that being said, one thing that I am a little bit concerned with the Timbers is that their home form has not been very good so far this season, and that if that is the defend that they put out against the Galaxy in this game, or if that's the defense performance against RSL and they're going to do the same thing in this game against the Galaxy, yeah, get ready to get absolutely ripped apart by this Galaxy attack that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, looked like a attack that looked like an old Galaxy team that is very dangerous going forward on the attack. So, yeah, I think this should be a very competitive game, and let's also not forget that both of these teams tends to not like each other, so expect there's going to be some rough challenges and there's going to be some chippiness in this game. But overall, I'm going to say this is going to be a draw between both of these teams. And finally, heading into the last game of this preview, is going to be LAFC versus the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, originally, I thought this game was going to be kicking off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. And by the way, LAFC currently have a record of 2-3-2, while the Quakes dead even in terms of the record at 2 apiece, 2 wins, 2 draw, and 2 losses. But originally, I thought this game was going to kick off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. But when I decided to check the schedule again while I was writing the games onto this board, I found out they changed the schedule. And that now this game is going to be at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, which pretty much give me a more better reason of why I am not reviewing 12 games on Wednesday night. And that if I do that, I'll probably be up until 30 minutes past midnight, and that video is not going to be uploaded until 4 in the morning. But what's even more frustrated about this late kickoff, and that I'm unfortunately ain't going to do the review until roughly about 10 o'clock after my time, is that this game is going to be on Twitter. Yup, the game that I fear that we are just going to get blown out, not only is going to be the case, but now that it's going to be on probably the most annoying broadcast out of any other broadcast in terms of MLS game. Yeah, that's a double whammy in terms of that. And I'm sorry, but if the Quakes does get blown out in this game, or at any point of this game gonna get blown out, I'm literally gonna mute the broadcast and not even gonna listen to them, because it's already kind of disappointing to see that the Quakes potentially are going to get blown out in this game by listening to the broadcast. But when you have annoying broadcasts like the Twitter stream, yeah, that's just too much to ask. Now, that being said, I know some people and maybe some Quakes fans saying that I'm being too pessimistic about this resort and that I'm not being optimistic whatsoever and kind of being a little bit too hard on the Quakes. Well, here's the thing. While I understand LAFC has not done very well this season, and while I understand it is pretty clear that there is a formula to beat this LAFC team, and all you need to do is to just be compact defense and have this bend but don't break kind of defensive mindset, and then just counter them because they tend to struggle whenever they try to defend a transitional attacking opponent. The biggest problem with the Quakes is that they can't do that. That's not their style. And the Quakes, especially with the defensive performance they play against the Galaxy, that is definitely anything but a bend but don't break kind of defense. And that they are going to be a team that is able to copy the same formula the Seattle Sounders and the Galaxy is going to do, they need to play much better in terms of the defensive performance. Because otherwise, if they don't defend well in this game, there's no chance they can play that transitional attack, and that, it doesn't work that you can play on the counter attack and also defend very badly at the same time. And I just feel like this is probably going to be a game where either we're going to somehow defend very well and maybe find a way to go on the transitional attack, or the fact that we're not going to defend at all, and that LAFC, who Bob Bradley is going to be angry and want blood coming out of this game after the last two resort that was pretty much some of the most embarrassing resort you can see this LAFC team has coming into this league. He would definitely want his team to get all 3 points in this game. And with that being said, looking at the last 4 head-to-head matchup, I don't even want to kind of mention it, because you probably already heard me a lot of time talking about the last couple of matchup between these two teams and how LAFC absolutely dominate this series, and that the Quakes have actually not scored a single goal in this series ever since they, of course, blew that 3-2 lead late in the game the first time both of these teams have played, and that it's been an 11-0 kind of aggregate score in the last 3 match. This is why I have to say LAFC is going to win this, and for the Quakes, I'm just praying that somehow in some way they can find that MLS is back kind of tournament momentum that they had, where they actually can be a compacted defensive team and somehow able to counter a very vulnerable LAFC defense. Because if that's not going to be the case, and they're going to defend the same way against the Galaxy like they did, or going to defend the same way in this game like they did against the Galaxy, be ready to be seeing a very similar result of what happened in the last 2 times when we faced against LAFC, which was not even close whatsoever. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of my predictions and preview of these 12 games. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these midweek action, and as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction of these games. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.